It wasn't the pastel pinks or baby blues that held Vanessa Davenport's attention. It wasn't the ridiculously expensive cashmere onesies or the hand-carved wooden rocking horses. She sat on a plush velvet armchair inside Chicago's most exclusive baby boutique, the Gilded Stork, a place she and her husband were supposed to visit together next week. But today, she was here alone. At 8 months pregnant, her presence looked perfectly normal. But the heavy legal-sized envelope resting in her designer handbag felt like a block of ice against her hip. She wasn't here to shop. She was here to wait. She was the final act in a tragedy he didn't even know he'd written. To any outside observer, Vanessa Davenport and Gregory Shaw had a life meticulously crafted from the pages of a luxury magazine. Their penthouse apartment on Lakeshore Drive boasted panoramic views of Lake Michigan, the water a sprawling, moody canvas that changed with the seasons. The floors were Italian marble, cool and unforgiving underfoot. The furniture a curated collection of minimalist pieces that cost more than most people's cars. It was a life of quiet aesthetic perfection. Vanessa, a rising star in the world of architecture, appreciated the clean lines and solid foundations of their home. It was a space she had helped design a physical manifestation of the life she thought she was building with Gregory. She was logical, precise, a woman who believed that if you used the right materials and followed the blueprint, the structure would be sound. At 34, with her first child on the way, a boy her own life's blueprint seemed to be unfolding flawlessly. Gregory was the engine to her design. A charismatic and ruthlessly ambitious partner at a private equity firm downtown, he moved through the world with an unshakable confidence that had captivated Vanessa when they first met. He had a smile that could disarm boardrooms and a talent for making billion-dollar deals seem as simple as ordering coffee. He called their unborn son his little chief, and would often come home late smelling of expensive scotch and victory, pressing his ear to Vanessa's swollen belly to hear the stock market reports. The cracks, when they began to appear, were hairline fractures easily dismissed. A new passcode on his phone, which he explained away as a new company security protocol. Late nights at the office became more frequent, justified by volatile emerging market he was trying to tame. There were dinners he'd cancel at the last minute, hushed phone calls he'd take on the balcony, even in the biting Chicago wind. Vanessa, pragmatic and trusting, accepted his reasons. Marriage, especially a high-powered one, required flexibility. Stress was a given. She was busy herself, finalizing a major project before her maternity leave and preparing the nursery, a serene space of muted greys, soft whites, and natural woods. The first tremor that truly shook her foundation came on a Tuesday. Gregory had been out of town for 2 days for a supposed conference in Boston. That evening, while sorting laundry, a credit card receipt fell from the pocket of his trousers. It wasn't from a Boston hotel or restaurant. It was from a place called the Dahlia, a notoriously intimate high-end restaurant in their own city on the Gold Coast. The charge was significant, and the date stamped on it was from the previous night, a night he was supposed to be 3,000 miles away. Vanessa stood frozen in their cavernous walk-in closet, the soft lighting glinting off rows of Gregory's identical custom-made suits. The receipt felt like a foreign object, a piece of shrapnel from a world she didn't know existed. Her mind, the architect's mind, raced to find a logical explanation. A mistake, a prepayment for a future event, a colleague using his card. She placed the receipt on her nightstand and tried to sleep, but the image of it was seared into her mind. The next morning, Gregory returned all smiles and apologies for being exhausted. He kissed her, his lips cool, and presented her with a small gift bag from a Boston souvenir shop, a pewter lobster keychain. The gesture was so mundane, so laughably normal, that it felt like a deliberate insult. "How was the conference?" she asked, her voice steady, her heart hammering against her ribs. "Long, boring," he said, loosening his tie. You know, PowerPoints and bad coffee. I missed you and the little chief like crazy. He looked her straight in the eye. He didn't blink. That was the moment the blueprint she had trusted began to dissolve. The perfect structure she believed they were building was a facade, and she realized with a sickening lurch that she had no idea what lay behind the walls. That night, she didn't confront him. The architect in her knew that you don't start demolition without knowing the full extent of the rot. Instead, after he fell asleep, she slipped out of bed, took the damning little receipt, and made a phone call to a man whose number she had saved years ago for a client going through a messy corporate dissolution. His name was Patrick Henderson, a private investigator. "Mr. Henderson," she said, her voice a whisper in the silent moonlit apartment. "I need your help. I have a project that requires the utmost discretion." Her project was to uncover the truth, no matter how ugly the demolition would be. Patrick Henderson was a man who blended into the background, a ghost in a beige raincoat, who specialized in the quiet, methodical dismantling of lies. He met Vanessa not in a shadowy office, but in a bright, bustling cafe far from her neighborhood, a place where their meeting would be nothing more than two strangers sharing a coffee. Vanessa laid out the facts with the same precision she would use to detail a building's structural weaknesses: the receipt, the late nights, the sudden obsessive privacy with his phone. She didn't cry. Her pain was a cold, heavy thing lodged deep in her chest, but her mind was startlingly clear. "I don't want assumptions, Mr. Henderson," she stated, her hands folded over her baby bump. "I want irrefutable proof. I want a timeline, names, places. I want to know the scale of the deception." Henderson nodded, his gaze assessing. He was used to clients blinded by rage or grief. Vanessa was different. She was approaching this like a general planning a campaign. "It can get expensive, Mrs. Shaw." "My husband values money above all else," Vanessa replied, a bitter edge to her voice. "It seems only fitting that I use it to discover his other investments. Spare no expense." The first report from Henderson landed in her secure anonymous email inbox a week later. The subject line was simply, "Project Update 1." Vanessa's hands trembled as she opened it. It contained photographs, grainy, long-lens shots of Gregory, not in a stuffy boardroom, but laughing over cocktails on a rooftop bar, with a woman. The woman was younger, with a cascade of fiery red hair that stood in stark contrast to Vanessa's own elegant, dark blonde bob. She was beautiful in a way that screamed for attention. The photo showed them leaning in close, his hand on the small of her back, her fingers tracing the lapel of his jacket. Another photo captured them getting into a taxi, his arm wrapped protectively around her. The report identified her as Tabitha Reed, age 27, a senior marketing associate at Gregory's firm. She'd been hired 6 months ago. The timeline clicked into place with sickening accuracy. 6 months ago was when Gregory had started becoming distant. The pain that followed was a physical blow. Vanessa had to grip the edge of her desk, her breath coming in ragged gasps as she stared at the images of her husband's betrayal. It wasn't just an affair, it was a relationship, a parallel life he was living while she was at home, lovingly painting the nursery for their son. The intimacy in the photos was what broke her. It was easy, comfortable. It was a mirror of what she thought they had. But grief quickly hardened into something else. Resolve. Henderson's next updates were even more damning. He documented their meetings twice, sometimes 3 times a week. Lunches that stretched for hours, dinners at discreet, expensive restaurants, including the Dahlia, and twice a weekend trip to a boutique hotel in Napa Valley, booked under Tabitha's name but paid for by a secret credit card Gregory held. Henderson's report included a copy of the credit card statement, a ghost account Vanessa had never known existed. It was on this statement that Vanessa's sharp eyes caught something else, something beyond the hotel charges and lavish gifts. There were several large cash withdrawals from ATMs located near offshore banking centers in the city, and a few transactions that looked like wire transfers to entities she didn't recognize. Her architect's mind trained to see patterns where others saw chaos lit up with a different kind of alarm. This wasn't just about infidelity anymore. She began her own parallel investigation. Using the login credentials Gregory had once given her for their joint tax filings, she delved into the deeper finances of his work. She was meticulous cross-referencing dates from Henderson's reports with company expense filings and project accounts. A picture began to form far uglier than she had imagined. Gregory wasn't just cheating on her, he was cheating his partners. He was using shell corporations disguised as legitimate vendors to siphon money from company investments. He would authorize payments for consulting services or market analysis to these phantom companies, which would then transfer the money to an offshore account. The secret credit card was his slush fund, a way to access the stolen money without a trace. He was building a secret nest egg, a golden parachute for a future that clearly did not include her. The full weight of his betrayal nearly crushed her. He hadn't just broken their vows, he had been actively stealing from their shared future, from their son's future, all while pretending to be the doting husband and father-to-be. The life they had built together wasn't just a lie, it was a crime scene. Vanessa contacted her family's lawyer, Ms. Audrey Chen, a formidable woman with a reputation for being a shark in divorce court. In a soundproofed conference room, Vanessa laid everything out. Henderson's surveillance reports, the secret credit card statements, and her own meticulously documented findings of Gregory's financial fraud. Audrey Chen listened, her face impassive. When Vanessa was done, the lawyer leaned back in her chair. "This isn't just a divorce, Vanessa," she said, her voice low and serious. "This is a demolition. You have enough evidence here to not only leave him with nothing but to potentially put him in prison." A fierce, protective instinct, raw and powerful, surged through Vanessa. It was for the child growing inside her, the one innocent soul in this mess. Gregory had threatened her son's security, his future. She would not let that stand. "I don't want a quiet separation, Audrey," Vanessa said, her voice as cold and hard as the marble floors in her penthouse. "I want justice. I want to dismantle everything he has built on his lies." And it was Audrey who formulated the final devastating plan. The last piece fell into place when Henderson delivered his final report. Tabitha Reed had been telling her friends she was pregnant. She'd been spotted leaving a pharmacy with a pregnancy test and later talking excitedly on the phone, rubbing her stomach. "He's replacing me," Vanessa whispered to herself, the words tasting like ash. "He's trying to build the same life, just with a new model." But then a new idea sparked a final dramatic flourish to their plan. Audrey confirmed that a person could serve their own divorce papers in Illinois. "He's taking her shopping for the baby he thinks she's having." Vanessa thought a dark, brilliant idea forming in her mind. "He's going to buy things for his new family with money he stole from his real one." She learned from Henderson that Tabitha had been begging Gregory to take her to the Gilded Stork, the most opulent baby boutique in Chicago. It was a status symbol, a public declaration. Gregory, in his arrogance, had finally agreed. The appointment was set for a Friday afternoon. Vanessa looked at her reflection in the darkened window of her lawyer's office. Her pregnant form was a silhouette against the city skyline. She was no longer just a wife. She was an architect of retribution. The blueprint was complete. All she had to do now was wait for the perfect moment to bring the whole rotten structure crashing down. Tabitha Reed believed she was on the cusp of getting everything she had ever wanted. At 27, she was sharp, ambitious, and acutely aware of the power her youth and beauty afforded her. When Gregory Shaw, a senior partner at her firm, had first turned his intense focus on her, she felt like she had won the lottery. He was everything she aspired to be around wealthy, powerful, and dripping with the kind of confidence that made the world bend to his will. Their affair began with clandestine lunches and stolen moments in the office, a thrilling secret that made her feel special, chosen. Gregory had told her His marriage was a hollow shell, a business arrangement that had long since lost its passion. Vanessa, he'd described, was cold, preoccupied with her work, and more of a partner than a wife. He painted a picture of a man trapped in a gilded cage, and Tabitha saw herself as the one with the key. She knew about Vanessa's pregnancy, of course. Gregory had told her with a sigh, framing it as an unfortunate complication, a final desperate attempt by his wife to trap him. It changes nothing between us. He had promised, his hand on her knee under a restaurant table. You're the one I want. You're my future. Tabitha chose to believe him. She saw Vanessa not as a person, but as an obstacle, a remnant of a past life that Gregory was shedding. And she had her own ace up her sleeve. A few weeks ago, after a missed period, likely due to stress, but a potent opportunity, nonetheless, she told Gregory she was pregnant. The news had the desired effect. Gregory's initial panic quickly morphed into a kind of possessive pride. If he was going to blow up his life, he needed a compelling reason, a new foundation to build upon. A new baby, with a new woman, was the ultimate justification. It wasn't just an affair, it was destiny. Tabitha played her part to perfection. She spoke of her symptoms, her cravings, her anxieties. She sent him photos of positive pregnancy tests she'd found online, passing them off as her own. She knew it was a dangerous game, a lie with a 9-month deadline, but she was confident she could secure a ring on her finger long before the truth came out. Once she was Mrs. Shaw, the details would become negotiable. Her biggest demand was for their relationship to move out of the shadows. She was tired of secret dinners and back entrances. She wanted public validation, and what could be more public, more symbolic than shopping for their baby together? She had fixated on the Gilded Stork, a place she had only read about in society magazines. It was the epitome of old money and established families, a place where the Vanderbilts and Rockefellers of Chicago would shop. Being seen there with Gregory would be a statement. It would make their new family real. Gregory had been hesitant. "It's too risky, Tabs," he'd said initially. "Vanessa and we were supposed to go there, and that's exactly why we need to go," Tabitha had insisted, her voice trembling with practiced emotion. "I don't want to feel like a secret Greg. I don't want our baby to be second best. I want him to have what your other baby has. I want to be the one you're proud to be with." His ego, his fatal flaw, couldn't resist. He saw the logic in her emotional plea. It was a power move, taking his new love, the mother of his new child, to the very place reserved for his old life, was a declaration of his own freedom and control. He was Gregory Shaw. He managed billion-dollar risks for a living. He could certainly manage this. On that Friday afternoon, as he drove his black Mercedes towards the Gold Coast, he felt a surge of adrenaline. Tabitha sat beside him, glowing, looking radiant in a designer dress he'd bought her. She chatted excitedly about cribs and mobiles, her hand resting possessively on his arm. "Are you nervous?" she asked, sensing his silence. "Never." Gregory lied smoothly, flashing the smile that had sealed so many deals. "Today is about us, about our future." In his mind, he was compartmentalizing. He had a plan. He would placate Tabitha with this grand public gesture. Then, over the next few weeks, he would initiate the amicable separation from Vanessa. He envisioned a clean break. He would be generous, of course, give her the apartment, a hefty settlement. He assumed she would be heartbroken, but ultimately compliant. He had underestimated her for years. He saw her quiet nature as weakness, her intellect as something confined to blueprints and building codes. He had no idea she was capable of drawing up a blueprint for his own destruction. As he pulled up to the curb, the elegant gold leaf sign of the Gilded Stork gleamed in the afternoon sun. He handed the keys to the valet, feeling a sense of defiant triumph. He was taking control of his narrative. "Ready, my love," he said, turning to Tabitha. "I've been waiting for this moment my whole life." She breathed, her eyes shining. He put his arm around her, guiding her towards the heavy glass doors. He felt powerful, invincible, the master of his own universe, walking into a store meant for new beginnings. He had no idea he was walking into the end of his world. The interior of the Gilded Stork was a hushed sanctuary of wealth. The air smelled faintly of lavender and new money. Soft classical music drifted from hidden speakers, and the lighting was expertly designed to make everything from the fret linen blankets to the silver rattles look ethereal. The few other customers were women with impeccably styled hair and quiet, well-behaved children. It was a world of serene, unadulterated luxury. Gregory felt a swell of pride as he guided Tabitha inside. The hostess, a polished woman in her 50s, greeted them with a polite, practiced smile. "Welcome to the Gilded Stork. Do you have an appointment?" "We do," Gregory said, his voice resonating with confidence. "For sure." Tabitha beamed, squeezing his arm. This was it, the public acknowledgement, the beginning of her dream. The hostess scanned her tablet. "Ah, yes, sure, right this way." She led them past displays of impossibly soft stuffed animals and miniature designer outfits. Gregory pointed out a tiny tuxedo-style onesie, and they both laughed. He felt the tension he'd been carrying begin to melt away. This was easier than he'd thought. This was right. The hostess guided them towards a private viewing area at the back of the boutique, a section reserved for clients purchasing entire nursery sets. It was arranged like a small, elegant living room, with plush armchairs and a thick, cream-colored rug. And sitting in one of those armchairs, as if she were royalty holding court, was Vanessa. For a moment, Gregory's brain failed to process the scene. It was a glitch in the matrix, two separate worlds colliding with impossible force. Vanessa shouldn't be here. His mind raced. Was it a coincidence? Did she change their appointment? But then he saw her face. There was no surprise, no shock, no tears. Her expression was unnervingly calm, her posture radiating a powerful, icy composure that he had never seen before. Her blue eyes, usually warm and gentle, were as hard and cold as diamonds. She looked directly at him completely, ignoring the woman clinging to his arm. The silence in the room was absolute, a vacuum that sucked all the air out. The friendly hostess, sensing a situation far above her pay grade, gave a tight smile and vanished. "Vanessa," Gregory finally managed to say, his voice a choked whisper. The single word sounded pathetic, inadequate. "What are you doing here?" Tabitha, her face a mask of confusion and dawning horror, looked from Gregory to the very pregnant, very composed woman in the chair. "Greg, who is this?" she asked, her voice small. Vanessa's gaze flickered to Tabitha for a brief, dismissive second before returning to her husband. "You know perfectly well who I am," she said, her voice even and dangerously quiet. "The question is, Gregory, who are you? The loving husband who kissed me goodbye this morning, or the man who brings his mistress to buy a layette with stolen money?" The words mistress and stolen money hung in the air like poison. Tabitha recoiled, as if slapped, her hand dropping from Gregory's arm. "Now, Vanessa, let's not make a scene." Gregory stammered, his bravado evaporating. He started to take a step towards her, his hands raised in a placating gesture. "Don't you dare come near me," Vanessa commanded, and the authority in her voice stopped him dead in his tracks. She slowly, deliberately reached into the expensive handbag at her side, a bag he had bought her for their last anniversary, and pulled out a thick, legal-sized envelope. She stood up, a movement that was graceful despite her advanced pregnancy. She was the embodiment of wronged womanhood, yet there was no trace of the victim about her. She was the judge, jury, and executioner. "I believe this belongs to you," she said, holding the envelope out. Gregory stared at it as if it were a venomous snake. He didn't move. "Take it, Gregory," she insisted. His hand trembled as he reached out and took the envelope. The paper felt cold, heavy. His name was printed on the front, along with the address of his firm. Tabitha, now pale and wide-eyed, finally found her voice. Stolen money? What is she talking about, Greg? Pregnant? I'm the one who's pregnant. Vanessa let out a short, mirthless laugh. Are you? That will be an interesting thing to prove in court. As for the money, she turned her full chilling attention back to Gregory. I know about the shell corporations, Gregory. I know about the offshore accounts. I know about the fraud. You didn't just break our marriage, you tried to bankrupt our child's future. Gregory's face went white. This was impossible. How could she know? You see, while you were building your sordid little fantasy life, Vanessa continued, her voice cutting through the boutique's quiet elegance. I was doing my own work. I'm an architect. Remember, I'm very good at examining structures and finding all the fatal flaws. And your entire life, my dear husband, is a house of cards. She took a step back, giving him a final dismissive look that encompassed both him and the horrified woman beside him. This isn't a discussion. This is a notification, she said. That envelope contains a summons for divorce on the grounds of adultery and a petition to the court for an immediate asset freeze citing the dissipation of marital assets and criminal financial misconduct. Your accounts, Gregory. They're already frozen. Your partners. They'll be getting a similar package from my lawyer as we speak. You are being served, Gregory, in every sense of the word. Without another glance, Vanessa turned and walked away. Her steps were measured and strong. She moved past the displays of innocent baby clothes, a queen leaving a battlefield, her dignity intact, leaving nothing but scorched earth behind her. The silence she left was deafening. Gregory stood clutching the envelope, his world collapsing in on him, in the middle of a baby boutique. Tabitha just stared at the empty space where Vanessa had been, the beautiful dream she had walked in with, now a pile of ashes at her feet. The moment Vanessa disappeared through the glass doors of the Gilded Stork, the spell of her powerful composure was broken and chaos rushed in to fill the void. Tabitha was the first to speak, her voice a shrill, panicked cry that shattered the boutique's serene atmosphere. What does she mean, frozen? What did she mean, criminal? Greg, what is going on? She grabbed his arm, but he flinched away. His eyes locked on the heavy envelope in his hand. His mind was a maelstrom of denial and terror. Frozen, criminal, partners. The words echoed in his head. This couldn't be happening. Vanessa was an architect. She designed buildings. She didn't understand complex financial instruments or offshore havens. It was a bluff. It had to be a bluff, a hysterical woman's desperate, empty threat. She's lying, he muttered more to himself than to Tabitha. She's just trying to scare me. But even as he said it, a cold dread was seeping into his bones. The look in Vanessa's eyes had not been hysterical. It had been the calm, certain look of someone holding all the cards. He ripped open the envelope with trembling fingers. The thick sheaf of papers inside felt impossibly heavy. The top page was a summons for dissolution of marriage. His name was there, a defendant. But it was the document underneath that made the blood drain from his face. Emergency petition for temporary financial restraining order and asset freeze. He scanned the legalese out. His deal-making brain struggling to keep up. Phrases leaped out at him. Significant evidence of fraudulent activity, transfers to undisclosed offshore entities, dissipation of marital assets, actions constituting economic marital waste. There were account numbers, his secret accounts. There were dates of wire transfers that corresponded with his business trips. There were names of the shell corporations he'd so carefully constructed. It wasn't a bluff. It was a meticulously researched, perfectly executed indictment. She knew everything. Greg, Tabitha's voice was sharp, pulling him from his horrified trance. Talk to me. Is our money gone? Our money? He snapped, the first spark of his cornered animal rage igniting. There is no our money. He stormed out of the private viewing area, leaving Tabitha standing amidst the pastel-colored symbols of a future that had just been obliterated. The other patrons in the store were now staring openly, their polite curiosity turned to undisguised gossip. The hostess stood near the entrance, wringing her hands clearly on the phone with security or a manager. Gregory, we burst out onto the street, the city's noise a jarring contrast to the boutique's silence. He fumbled for his phone, his hands shaking so badly he could barely unlock it. He first tried to open his primary banking app. Access denied. Please contact your financial institution. Panic, cold and sharp, pierced through his denial. He tried the app for his secret offshore account. Account activity has been suspended pending a legal review. It was real. She had done it. Vanessa, his quiet, artistic, predictable wife, had financially decapitated him. He dialed his lawyer, his voice cracking with desperation. Michael, it's Greg Shaw. We have a massive problem. A 5-alarm fire. As he stood on the sidewalk, the world spinning around him, the valet pulled up with his Mercedes. Gregory, acting on autopilot, reached for his wallet to get a tip, but then he stopped. The custom black card he used for everything, his invincible card linked to the business accounts, suddenly felt like a useless piece of plastic. Was it already worthless? Tabitha came rushing out of the store, her face streaked with tears, her earlier radiance completely gone. Gregory, you have to fix this. What about me? What about the baby? He stared at her, and for the first time, he didn't see a vibrant, exciting future. He saw a liability, another mouth to feed, another problem in a rapidly growing mountain of them. The baby. Her pregnancy was the lever she'd used, the catalyst for this entire disaster. Get in the car, he snarled, the charm gone replaced by raw, ugly fear. The ride back was silent and suffocating. Tabitha wept quietly in the passenger seat. Gregory drove on pure instinct, his mind racing through his contacts, his strategies trying to find a way out. But every door he imagined opening seemed to slam shut. His partners. She said her lawyer was contacting his partners. That wasn't just a divorce tactic. It was a professional execution. His reputation, the bedrock of his entire career, was about to be turned to rubble. When they got back to his car, parked in a garage near the boutique, he turned to Tabitha. His face was a grim mask. I have to handle this, he said, his voice flat. I need you to go home. Take a cab. A cab? But what about us? She whispered, her voice filled with disbelief. There is no us right now. He exploded, his control finally shattering. There is only this, a complete and utter catastrophe. Do you understand? Go home. He left her standing there on the cold concrete of the parking garage, a lone, tragic figure next to a "Pay Here" sign. As he sped away, he glanced in the rearview mirror. He wasn't looking at the woman he'd professed to love. He was looking at the starting point of his ruin. The weight of the papers on the seat next to him was nothing compared to the crushing weight of his own monumental stupidity. The days that followed the confrontation at the Gilded Stork were not just a collapse. They were a vivisection, a slow, merciless dissection of a life, and Gregory Shaw was awake for the entire procedure. His world, once a fortress of wealth and influence, was being dismantled brick by brick, and the architect of its ruin was the woman he had so fatally underestimated. His first taste of true powerlessness came less than an hour after he fled the boutique. After dropping Tabitha in a parking garage, he drove to the offices of his personal lawyer, a shark named Michael Brent, ready to declare war. He strode into the lobby, his mind racing with strategies of counter-petitions and accusations of marital hysteria. He reached the front desk and announced himself. I need to see Michael immediately. It's an emergency. He said the words clipped and strained. Of course, Mr. Shaw. He's expecting you. Can I get you a water coffee? The receptionist asked, her deference a familiar comfort. Coffee, he grunted, already pulling out his phone to check his accounts again. Access denied. Account suspended. The words glowed like a death sentence. The real humiliation came later that day, after a fruitless, panicked meeting where his lawyer reviewed Vanessa's petition with a grim face and warned of the significant credible threat it posed. Gregory tried to pay the initial retainer. He handed over his exclusive Black American Express card, the one he used for everything, the one that symbolized his limitless resources. The paralegal swiped it. A moment passed. She swiped it again. A small, awkward frown creased her brow. "I'm sorry, Mr. Shaw," she said, her voice dropping to a whisper. "It's been declined." Declined. The word was alien. It was a word for other people, for the financially irresponsible, for the poor. He stared at her, then at the useless piece of black plastic on the counter. The asset freeze wasn't a threat. It was a cage that had already snapped shut around him. He had to pay with a wire transfer from the single small account the court had left him for living expenses, an amount that felt like a joke and was now significantly lighter. The professional execution was even more brutal. He was summoned to an emergency board meeting the next morning. As he walked through the glass doors of his firm, he felt a change in the atmosphere. The security guard, who usually greeted him with a cheerful "Morning, Greg," suddenly seemed fascinated by his shoes. Junior analysts scurried out of his path, their eyes averted. He was no longer a lion in his own jungle. He was a contamination. The boardroom was an ice chamber. His partner's men, he had known for over a decade, were seated around the polished mahogany table. Their faces were grim masks of corporate necessity. The firm's general counsel, a severe woman named Eleanor Vance, sat at the head of the table, a thick file open before her. There was no handshake, no offer of coffee. "Gregory, thank you for coming," Eleanor began, her voice devoid of any warmth. "We have all reviewed the preliminary file sent to us by Chen Legal on behalf of your wife. The allegations are, to put it mildly, catastrophic." "It's a lie," Gregory blurted out, trying to summon his old commanding presence. "It's a vindictive, messy divorce tactic from a woman who—" "Save it," the senior partner, Robert Miles, cut in, his voice like gravel. "We've seen the account numbers, Greg. We've seen the shell company names: Apex Market Solutions, Global Strategic Ventures. They have copies of invoices you signed off on. Invoices for services never rendered. They have everything." Gregory felt the floor drop out from under him. "She couldn't have—" "How?" "Apparently your wife is far more meticulous than you ever gave her credit for," Eleanor stated coldly. "Effective immediately, you are suspended from all duties and partnerships. A forensic accounting team has been retained for a full audit. You are to have no contact with any clients or staff. Your access to company systems has been revoked. You will be escorted from the building." He looked around the table at the faces of the men he had made millions with. He saw no sympathy. He saw only self-preservation. He saw fear. He had exposed them all to his toxic mess. The final insult was a cardboard box brought in by a silent assistant containing the few personal items from his desk: a framed photo of him and Vanessa. From happier times, a silver pen set his favorite mug. He was escorted to the elevator by a security guard. The walk of shame past his glass-walled office, a blur of humiliation. Desperate and cornered, he drove to Tabitha's loft. He needed someone to blame, a target for the inferno of rage and fear building inside him. The doorman, a man to whom Gregory had condescendingly slipped $100 bills, stopped him cold in the lobby. "I'm sorry, Mr. Shaw. I can't let you up." "I'm on her list," Gregory snarled. "Not anymore, sir. Ms. Reed updated her visitor permissions this morning. You're specifically excluded." He saw the flicker of satisfaction in the doorman's eyes. Gregory pushed past him to the intercom, furiously buzzing her apartment. "Tabitha, pick up. We need to talk. You started this." Her voice, tinny and distant, finally came through the speaker. "Go away, Greg. It's over. Over. You lied to me. The pregnancy. All of it. You trapped me. I didn't force you to steal from your own company," she retorted, her voice suddenly sharp and sober. "I didn't force you to lie to your wife. That's your mess. Stay away from me." The intercom went dead. As he stood there trembling with impotent fury, a moving truck rumbled up to the building's loading dock. She was already erasing him. Meanwhile, across town, Vanessa sat with Audrey Chen reviewing the full scope of what her investigation had unearthed. It was worse than she knew. Forgery, embezzlement, wire fraud. The firm, in its haste to cauterize the wound, had turned over everything to the U.S. Attorney's Office. "It's a federal case now, Vanessa," Audrey explained gently. "This has moved far beyond a divorce." She also shared the PI's final report on Tabitha Reed, the history of deception, the faked pregnancy tests. Vanessa listened, a cold sadness settling over her. The fiery-haired woman wasn't a mastermind. She was just a parasite drawn to a rotting host. Gregory's world shrank to the 4 beige walls of a sterile corporate apartment, his only companion, the echo of his own failures. His calls to former friends and colleagues went to voicemail, never to be returned. He was an outcast, a walking headline of scandal. He would sit for hours staring out the window, replaying every mistake, every arrogant assumption. He saw Vanessa's face everywhere, not weeping, not hysterical, but cool and composed, looking at him with those diamond-hard eyes in the middle of the gilded stalk. He had thought her a fragile piece of art to be displayed in his perfect life. He saw now that she was the architect, and he was nothing but a flawed design she had condemned, erased, and was now building over. The 6 months that followed were a season of profound transformation, mirroring the slow, deliberate thaw of the Chicago winter. As the ice on Lake Michigan fractured and retreated, so too did the frozen grief in Vanessa's heart. Her final days of pregnancy were spent not in the cold, marbled expanse of the Lakeshore Drive penthouse, but in a temporary furnished apartment, a neutral space where she could breathe without inhaling the ghosts of her past life. The day before the movers came to clear out the penthouse, she went back one last time. The cavernous rooms, stripped of their curated furniture and expensive art, echoed with every step. She walked through the space, her hand resting on her full belly, not with anger, but with a kind of detached archaeological interest. This was a ruin, a beautifully constructed, architecturally perfect ruin of a life that had never been real. She stood before the panoramic window, looking out at the city lights twinkling like a fallen constellation. She remembered standing in this exact spot with Gregory years ago, dreaming of the family they would raise here. The memory no longer stung. It felt like watching a scene from a movie about someone else. She placed a hand on the cold glass, said a silent goodbye to the woman she used to be, and walked out without looking back. The birth of her son in early April was a primal, transformative storm. In the sterile white of the delivery room, through the haze of pain and effort, she was fiercely, singularly focused. The thought of Gregory flickered once a brief, bitter image of the man who should have been holding her hand, who was instead awaiting sentencing in a legal limbo of his own making. But the thought was instantly consumed by a wave of raw life-affirming power. When the ordeal was over, and the nurse placed a warm, wriggling bundle in her arms, the world outside the room ceased to exist. She looked down at her son's perfect, tiny face, his full head of dark hair, and the calm, slate-blue eyes that mirrored her own. A love so fierce and absolute washed over her that it felt like the final cleansing act of the demolition. This was real. This was her foundation. She named him Evan, a name that meant young warrior. In that moment, she knew she had won the only battle that ever truly mattered. With the legal proceedings finalized by Audrey Chen's formidable team, resulting in a court judgment that awarded Vanessa the vast majority of the marital estate as restitution for Gregory's calculated fraud, she began to build again. She purchased a sprawling, slightly neglected Tudor-style home in Evanston, a leafy suburb known for its strong community and historic architecture. The house had what she loved: good bones, a story to tell, and a large overgrown garden promising new life. It was everything the penthouse was not: warm, a little imperfect and grounded in earth, not sky. The first few months in the new house were a blur of activity that was both exhausting and deeply healing. Days were measured in feedings, diaper changes, and Evan's sleepy smiles. Nights were spent rocking him in the nursery. She'd designed its walls, painted a soft, calming sage green. In her spare moments, she didn't rest. She worked. She stripped old wallpaper, sanded hardwood floors until her muscles ached, and drew up her plans for a new kitchen. The physical labor was a balm, a way to reclaim her own strength, to feel the tangible results of her efforts under her own hands. One afternoon, while she was on a ladder painting the trim in the living room, her new next-door neighbor, a kind-faced woman named Maria, came over with a warm loaf of banana bread. "You're a force of nature, you know that," Maria said, eyeing Vanessa's work. "Most new mums are lucky if they get a shower." Vanessa smiled, a genuine, unburdened smile. "It helps me think. Building things." "Well," Maria said, setting the bread on a dust-covered table, "welcome to the neighborhood. If you ever need a hand or just someone to hold the little guy so you can have that shower, you just knock." It was a simple gesture, but for Vanessa, it was a cornerstone for the new community she was laying, one built on kindness and simple sincerity. The news about Gregory came on a Tuesday morning via a phone call from Audrey Chen. "It's done, Vanessa," Audrey said, her voice crisp but not unkind. "He took the plea bargain. 7 years minimum security. It made the wire this morning." Later, Vanessa saw the article online. There was a photo of Gregory entering the courthouse. The bespoke suit hung on a frame that was gaunt and stooped. The charismatic, world-conquering smile was gone, replaced by a grey, hollowed-out expression. The titan of finance had become a spectre. Vanessa studied the image, feeling not a shred of vengeful glee, but a profound and somber finality. It was the last page of a long, painful chapter. She closed the laptop, took a deep, cleansing breath, and went to check on her sleeping son. His world would never be touched by that man's shadow. Her own world was now filled with light. Her firm, Davenport Designs, officially launched from a sunlit office on the second floor of her home. Her first client was a young family who wanted to build an energy-efficient home that felt both modern and timeless. They spoke of durability, honesty in materials, and creating a space for their children to grow. As Vanessa listened, she knew she had found her calling anew. She wasn't just designing houses, she was helping people build their sanctuaries. One final piece of the past fell into place a month later. Audrey called again. "A little postscript for you. Patrick Henderson likes to keep his files tidy. He followed a loose end. Your husband's associate, Tabitha Reed. She's working as a hostess at a steakhouse in Scottsdale. Seems her particular skill set didn't translate well without a wealthy benefactor." Vanessa leaned back in her chair, looking out the window at the green leaves of the oak tree in her yard. She thought of Tabitha, not with scorn, but with a distant, clinical pity. The woman had been a tool, a weapon Gregory had used against their marriage, and ultimately against himself. She was a symptom of his moral decay, not its cause. Her fate was just another piece of wreckage from the blast zone he had created. That evening, with Evan cooing softly on the playmat beside her, Vanessa sat at her drafting table. The scent of fresh paint and sawdust still lingered in the air, a perfume of progress. She picked up her pencil, its graphite point sharp and precise. On the paper was not a grand, imposing skyscraper, but the elegant, welcoming design of a porch for her own home, a place for rocking chairs, summer evenings, and watching her son take his first steps. The lines she drew were clean, the angles were true, and the foundation was unshakable. She was home, and she was finally beautifully free. That is the stunning story of Vanessa Davenport, a woman who turned the deepest betrayal into a blueprint for her own liberation. It's a story about how the quietest people can possess the most formidable strength, and how true justice isn't always loud and explosive, but can be as methodical and devastating as a controlled demolition. Vanessa didn't just get mad, she got strategic. She used her intelligence, her pain, and her unwavering focus to dismantle the man who tried to shatter her world. But what do you think? Was Vanessa's plan a perfect act of justice or a cold-hearted revenge? Fantasy brought to life. Could you have done what she did? Let us know your thoughts in the comments below. We read every single one. If you were captivated by this story of resilience and retribution, please show your support by hitting that like button and share this video with someone who needs a reminder of their own inner strength. And most importantly, make sure you subscribe to our channel and turn on all notifications so you never miss another story of real-life drama that will leave you speechless. Thank you for listening.
And that wraps up today's story. Now we want to hear from you. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments, and let's see how far these stories reach. If this story moved you or gave you chills, give it a like, share, and subscribe for more powerful stories. One last thing, rate the story from 1 to 10 in the comments. Your feedback helps us bring you even better ones next time. Thanks for watching. We appreciate you being part of this storytelling journey.